guys, for the first time, it is so exciting for me to welcome this man to the show to react to UFC 313, a pioneer, a legend, an icon in the sport, the man in the hat, Chuck Mindenhall. Welcome to Submission Radio for the first time, brother. What a big occasion this is for me.
I've been waiting for this call, man. So I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me on. And it's kind of fun, right? Like after a big event like this to come on and chat it up, let's do this thing.
Dude, the timing couldn't be better, right? There's a lot to discuss. There's a lot going on. And by the way, for people at home that are wondering, I am losing my voice, but I got coffee here. I got the whole thing, so I'm going to make it through. Don't worry about me.
Going to need something stronger after that event, man.
I'll tell you, though, man, a man who is strong but couldn't make it through with a title by the end of the event is Alex Pereira. Let me just ask you off the top right here, Chuck. What kind of scorecards did you have? Did you match up? Did you have Ankalaev winning this thing?
You know, I realized it was a close fight. I thought going into the final round that it was 2-2. And I will admit that third round was very close. But going into the last round, I was like, it's probably 2-2. And sometimes you think that based on the crowd maybe steering a close round into the, to the favor of a guy like Alex Pereira, because they were cheering him on. They were booing Ankalaev. So a little bit of that was just like more like maybe human nature, more than just I'd have to go back and watch the round to see if it was who's it really belonged to. But 2-2 going in, and I thought Alex won the fifth. So I was anticipating, I knew it was very close, but I thought in the end that it would be 3-2 for Alex. And in fact, when they read the scorecards and they said one of them was 49-46, I assumed that was for Alex, just because it felt like that would be a score you would see in this kind of fight, right? Like you would see somebody who kind of saw it more dominant than it actually was. So I was a little bit surprised, man, when they called out Magomed's name there.
It is crazy. I was having a look on the internet, and everyone had their own kind of scorecards, right? Like some people had 3-1, Ankalaev going into the main event. Other people had it drawn 2-2, and similar to yourself, had Pereira winning. What do you think Ankalaev did here that was able to slow Pereira down to the point where we saw him at the first round land 15 leg kicks and then go to the end where he was kind of just standing there, right? He wasn't able to do much for a lot through the middle of the fight. And even though towards the end he was able to sort of come back a little bit, he's definitely looking a little bit tired and not quite himself.
You talking about Ankalaev?
Pereira.
Oh, Pereira, yeah. It seemed to me, and you tell me what you thought too. It seemed to me he was keeping his hands a little lower, and I'm guessing that was there was so much talk about the Ankalaev, Dagestan, wrestling, all this stuff. Even though not a lot of that was supported, Magomed doesn't really wrestle as much as people like to think he does. So I was like, I wasn't even sure he would do that, but it seemed like the respect factor was there. He was keeping his hands a little bit down. So occasionally he was getting clipped. And it was the crazier thing for me was it just didn't seem like he was interested or he was just hesitant to pull the trigger on anything up top. There was a couple of times where you could see Ankalaev would move in, take a couple shots, and the counter was there. You could see it, but he just wasn't doing it. I know he's not as great when he's backing up in those situations, but there were a couple of openings. I just did, maybe just the urgency wasn't there. Maybe he thought he would get those looks later. Maybe he thought at some point he'd just catch him and then he could just go into, beast mode and finish the fight. But whatever it was, it just seemed to me like he was a little bit holstered. What did you think about that? Because there was just a couple times I'm like, I thought he was going to come to life and he really didn't.
Yeah, it was interesting. I think like Ankalaev, he was able to really through the middle. Like with the problem with Pereira is there's a lack of head movement, right? And I was thinking that end of that second round when Ankalaev was able to land that shot and kind of stumbled Pereira, yeah. I think it kind of got him a little bit hesitant. I don't think he underestimated Ankalaev, but I think a part of him must have underestimated the power and the striking that he brought in there, right? Because that boxing from Ankalaev, Chuck, he was able, when he was on the inside and going through the middle, it just looked like Pereira was not prepared or just was surprised by the speed and the way that Ankalaev was able to hit him. I think at one point, Ankalaev landed like 5 straights in a row, right?
Yeah,
that was wild.
He came in a couple of times, like where at that I know the sequence you're talking about. The times he kind of came in aggressively, he was finding success. Obviously, he was respecting Pereira's power. He didn't want to get like hit with something in some kind of wild exchange. But very selective, but finding enough success on the feet where I almost felt like it was a poor strategy in the 5th round to just kind of, go back to let me tie you up, and, toward the end of that fight, because I'm like, if he loses, he's going to regret this decision in the end, to not just stand with him, because he was having more success, honestly. Like, and he was beating up the legs too of Pereira. I know the commentary was a little more focused the other way, but I thought he looked pretty good in there. Like, obviously neither guy was just opening up and going to go wild. We just watched Gaethje, and Fiziev, like, they're going at it a little more. And obviously, like, there's an expectation with a Pereira fight. They were a lot more measured. For a main event like that, the kind of excitement, it might have let the crowd down a little bit. But in the end, man, Ankalaev, you gotta kind of hand it to him, because I think he fought the fight he needed to fight, and came away with the win. And that's really the only goal there, right? Like, you just want to make sure you get that belt.
A lot of people online saying, and I heard on the broadcast, will there be an immediate rematch after this? I mean, I don't know. What do you think? Do you think they go to this immediate rematch? Do you think they take Pereira and just shift him up to heavyweight because he's 37? And I guess in a lot of people's eyes, he maybe would have won that fight, and maybe he can still go off that momentum. What would you do with Pereira next? Do you want to see an immediate rematch?
This is a toughie, man, because it was not a great visual. The fight wasn't that great, but I was already thinking about this too, because you're like, what do you do with Ankalaev? Do you just open up the light heavyweight division again for business? Yuri, I mean, like, the guys that you could bring up and kind of make a challenge right away aren't going to be the sexiest matchups, only because your A side is now on the sideline. So I think that the play would be, and it's be really interesting to see if there's an excuse factor, that, how they do this sometimes, like, well, Alex was dealing with something or whatever it is. If there's some kind of, excuse that's put into play and there's enough public demand for it, yeah, I would do that. Not even just with the public demand. I just think that with Alex Pereira, even though he hasn't had the longest reign, he's had such an explosive year in 2024, the fighter of the year. And not just that, but just saving the UFC in big events. If anybody could warrant it and maybe leverage, hey, man, I was there for you for all these events and I saved, 4 in a row or whatever, it could be him. And if he wants it, I can't think of what the UFC would do that would make more sense than that. I think that makes the most sense, is to give him the other shot. Otherwise, what are you doing with him? If he goes up to heavyweight at this point, it's a little bit of on a buzzkill, isn't it? So it's like, I don't know. You probably want to be hitting on all cylinders when he goes up to heavyweight. Now, he's not going to be doing that yet.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, light heavyweight right now, you thought it was dead before. Yeah. Oh boy. And I love Carlos Ulberg, but goddamn, if he wins against Jan, it's like, okay, what are we gonna do with this division here? It's interesting though. Yeah. What are we gonna do?
I mean, that would have been a fun fight. Like, if Alex had won, right, and they're like, well, he's got to fight one more at 205. That Ulberg fight. I was talking about this with Luke and Brian on Morning Combat. To me, I thought that was maybe the only real compelling thing left for him there. But now, obviously, it changes the scenario.
It's interesting. Pereira was in Sydney, UFC 312. Right. I saw him there. He came down because I think someone paid him to be at a lunch or a seminar or a dinner. That's not the kind of stuff you should be doing leading into a big fight with potentially your hardest challenge. What do you think, Chuck? Do you think this whole whirlwind of trying to capitalize on your name is now starting to sort of get to Pereira a little bit? I mean, we saw him be able to avoid it for a while, short notices, injuries.
Yes.
But is it getting to the point now where it's affecting him?
Yeah, I pointed this out, like, as subtly as I could, because you didn't want to, and it's weird because he's almost been so superhuman for a little while here. And you're like, if anybody could pull this off, it'd be him. But I have to say, these look like red flags to me. We saw Volkanovski, where he went down to Puerto Rico, remember, for one of his camps. I forget which exactly it was. I know it was one of the Islam fights, I think, right? Like, but he went down there and it was kind of a disrupted camp, and he had a little bit of like you could almost point to it a little bit. I'm like, yeah, maybe he was doing too much. And this particular thing, it's only a couple weeks out before the fight. And I brought this up to the camp and they were very defiant about it. It was like they had been hearing about it quite a bit. I was with Pereira in his camp last week in the league before fight week. And they had, they basically downplayed it as meaning anything. They said it was an obligation that they'd had on the books for months just kind of coincide. They're like, rather than leave him hanging, let's just go do it. We can train out there and all that. But you know damn well that Australia is not very close to the east coast of the United States, and to get out there is like a full day, 24 hours worth of travel. So I think that had to have played a little bit of a role. I just don't think that I don't think his camp could have been as smooth as he wanted it to be. So I'm not, and these things like this is, he made his bet in this sense, and I don't know if it goes any different. I honestly don't. But as far as taking a little bit, like maybe taking Magomed a little bit unseriously, you could point to things like that and be like, if he really, really was focused on it, maybe he doesn't do that trip,
Let me ask you this, man. If he does go up to heavyweight eventually, I mean, we saw him against Ankalaev. He kind of struggled a little bit. What do you think he looks like if he was in there with an Aspinall, for example? What would that fight look like in your opinion?
See, I think that's where the imagination now sours on this, because I think if, like, let's say he just went in there with Magomedov, maybe he went through a little bit of weather early and then boom, he just knocks him out. You'd be like, okay, that power is unparalleled. This guy, what else is for him? Of course you'd want to see it, because you'd be like, I'm not going to doubt him. He's just going, he's doing stuff that we haven't seen at a meteoric pace. Like, he's just taking out these guys. It changes when you see a fight like this. Like, it just changes in a dynamic where you think he'll be undersized. He won't be able to withstand the types of things like Tom's way more like, I think that with something like with a guy like Aspinall, he's going to have a lot more dynamic approach to his offense and defense, but like his offense specifically than Magomedov. I think he would be very difficult for Pereira. I would have thought that even if Pereira went right through him, but you would have been more compelled to see, like, you'd be like, well, why not, man? This is house money. Let's see how far Alex can take this thing. I don't know. What do you think? I don't think that it's I don't think it has the same cachet as it did before,
I think the UFC is jumping on the phone now and like, you know what, John, we might meet that extra $5 million to make this fight possible, right? Do you feel like they were sort of holding out? Let's see what happens. Maybe Alex walks out.
That's a great
out.
point.
Now the leverage is kind of gone, right? You got to make that Jones fight.
They're going to have to. And I do think there was in the back of, I mean, it's how many ways can you screw Tom Aspinall if that was really the case? But at the same time, I got that sense, right? Like, you kind of get the sense they're like, let's see how things play out in this, because honestly, man, with recency bias and the way the crowd, this demographic really finds this enthusiasm, you would look at the Pereira, like a Pereira John Jones fight would suddenly seem very big. So I feel like the UFC was actually kind of waiting to see how that was going to work. And this all works in Aspinall's favor. Let's hope. You know what I mean? I would hate it if it didn't happen after all of this, because you would go from all these brilliant options and possibilities to not getting even the most basic fight, the unification, right? So they got to do it.
Dude, let's talk about the co-main for a sec as well, because Justin Gaethje was able to get it done against Fiziev. But man, Fiziev brought it on a guy on 12 days notice, came down. By the way, I think Fiziev has to be the happiest guy I've ever seen during fight week and like walking out. The guy was just like laughing, like he won the lottery, right? As soon as he got this Justin Gaethje fight, he's like thanking everyone. Yeah. Just like hugging everyone. I've never seen someone so happy to fight Justin Gaethje. Like, this is ridiculous. But of course, in the fight, he slowed down a little bit, and Justin Gaethje was able to sort of jump on and get some momentum here. Well, did you agree with the scorecards here? Did you have Justin Gaethje winning it?
So it was so close too, wasn't it?
It was.
In the end, I thought that Gaethje probably would get it. But, that third round, I felt like the commentary was a little bit like, oh, yeah, Gaethje's turning it on, and Fiziev's, he's kind of fading. And maybe that was true to an extent, but I knew, like, even just, I think they flashed the, the strikes at the end of there, and it was very close. It was very close. And so I was seeing that as a very close round, but I thought Gaethje just down the stretch, and I'm talking the final minute, probably solidified it. Like, the visual of it looked like he got it done. It was a great fight, man. I mean, and I thought Fiziev came in there, like that first round, I was like, this is exactly how you got to do it. He was mixing it up. The takedowns, like things like that. I was like, this is going to be a completely different fight. But then it kind of turned into what we'd seen before. Like, he starts getting pieced up and just kind of losing momentum in that second round. And obviously that's kind of what shifted it. But it was a good fight. I thought they got the right guy, though. There's no robbery in a situation like that.
For Fiziev, for example, he comes in 12 days notice, kind of saves this card, right? Because even though everybody wanted to see Pereira, like Ankalaev, maybe not the biggest name, and people were
Yeah.
really excited about the Dan Hooker, Justin Gaethje fight. So
Yeah,
he's
true.
kind of the perfect guy to save it. What do you think is next for Fiziev? I don't think he loses that much steam because before this, he was telling me, he's like, dude, I can't get a fight. Like, no one wants to fight me. He's just sitting there. No one wants to sign a contract. I mean, does this elevate his profile a little bit? Even though it's a loss, does this get him back into the motion of potentially getting another matchup sooner or later and potentially getting people more excited about this next fight that he's going to have?
Well, it's funny because you mentioned Dan Hooker, and sometimes you look at losses, you look at these losing streaks, and you think, oh, he's going to have a hard time. He'll never get back. But that's really not the case with certain guys. Can overcome this. He's definitely one of those type of guys. We were talking. You mentioned Dan Hooker, and like obviously he had a losing skid where he lost whatever it was, 4 out of 5, whatever that number was. And he started to turn it back. And it's weird when he does that. You're like, okay, now we're flashing vintage form. Now he's this beast again. Maybe he's even better in sort of that, Weili Zhang, type of situation where they have a defeat or two and then they come back. Resolve is stronger. Like everything, like there's no more complacency. They'll never have complacency again if they ever had it. You know what I mean? So I feel like Fizzy, he had a 6 or 7 fight win streak before he started to run into, Gaethje and the trouble. And obviously the injury to Gamrot, that should not hurt him in the end, really, but I think it does. I think when it all settles, it does raise his, I don't think he loses much by this, right? I think that he's still going to be able to hook into a biggish fight, a guy who's still kind of toward the top, and he's one win away from being right back in there. I don't think that this will be some kind of long-term thing where he can't get back into a title situation,
Yeah, I've got Dan Hooker and I think Beneil tomorrow morning, and we'll find out exactly what they're thinking about what's next for them. But there's a lot of stuff that happened on this card, man, in that division that opens up a fight for Fiziev. I think it's interesting that you say that raises the profile, but you can't lose the next one, right? Because now you're in a bunch of losses. So it's like you're in a position where you're going to get that fight, but if you lose it, man, who knows what could be.
And I feel like the UFC, the UFC, if they put him into a bad situation on the next one, I'd be like, okay, what is going on here? Like he must, it's like, but like you mentioned, he's a very happy guy. Watching him kind of in his excitement, I really believed he'd win this fight based on, like, you could tell he had Gaethje circled. It was kind of like his dream came true to be like, okay, you get a second crack at it. There aren't many mulligans that you can get that kind of correct an etch-a-sketch, kind of like what just happened. But he had that moment, and he came up short. It was a competitive fight, but if they give him some bad situation, which I don't imagine they will, I would imagine they put him against somebody around where he's at, and I'm with you. You lose that one, it changes everything. I think that's the big fight. This one was more like, hey, let's, we got a hot dice. Let's see what happens here,
Like, I'm just having a look at the rankings here, for example, and it's a funny situation at lightweight. It's kind of like out with the old guard, in with like not the new guard, but maybe like the newer guard that was supposed to take over initially. And then the newer guard that's coming through on the card earlier on today.
Yeah.
But like looking at this, you got guys like Moicano, Dariush, Gamrot, all sorts of guys in this division. Obviously, Jalin Turner is out now. We'll talk about that in a sec. BSD, but all these guys kind of trying to make it in this division and hang in there in that top 15. It's almost going to be like a battle of who's going to be able to stay and who's kind of got to go. And I think Fiziev maybe might get one of those names. But I got to ask you with Justin Gaethje, right?
Yeah.
This guy was able to pick up a win with his blank gloves. I felt like we were watching UFC one for a second. That was weird. People saying that it was something to do with the sponsorship thing or something like that, but apparently they rubbed off in the back and he didn't want to switch gloves. Interesting that the UFC let him walk out with blank gloves. Shows you the respect they have for him. But what do you think is next for him? Because right now in the division, obviously Islam is looking for challenges. We've got Ilia potentially coming in to fight Islam, but also people going, is this the time to do Gaethje Ilia as like a check to see if this is a man who deserves the title shot next? What would you do with Justin Gaethje if it was up to you, knowing especially that maybe we don't have Gaethje around for that much longer?
It's such a toughie, and I think that we were contemplating this before too. Like I talked a little bit about this before this fight. I thought if Fiziev wins, obviously, like you kind of get fresh blood into that space. It kind of catapults him into that top space where like you can make new matchups. With Gaethje, it's kind of like a lot of it is played out, but I'm not sure that you could just throw him into. It's so weird with him because he's such a pleasing fighter to watch. People love him. Like he brings it every time. I wouldn't be surprised if somehow he ends up into a huge fight, title or not, like because I think he's willing, and sometimes that's half of it. Sometimes just being willing to jump in there to do whatever you got to do to get it. He seems to always have that. But I think Dustin Poirier, like if they wanted to do that trilogy, I think that would make some sense because I don't know who else, like, unless you can think of something, I don't really know who else fits the bill for a guy like Poirier right now, like that would make sense for him. A trilogy fight would make some sense. I wouldn't mind seeing Gaethje when he does this, when he keeps turning back time and you just see him, the same old dude. We're all worried about, he got knocked out so violently last fight. I'm just afraid that this is the end. And then he comes out and puts on that performance. It's hard to deny him, man. It's just hard to say, you can't have more cracks at whatever the top guys are. You got to just kind of keep playing it, right? You mentioned he's 36. Like he's up there in age. He's not going to keep giving you these fights. So, you can capitalize on it for at least one more. And, it'd be interesting to see what they do, man. Like, do you like the Poirier trilogy?
I don't know, because I think they were talking about Max Holloway, right? But yeah. I think I kind of like Justin Gaethje stepping in at Max on that trilogy. I don't know. It was interesting. My big question here was how durable is Gaethje going to be after that stoppage? Right. And man, he took some shots. He looked great. So from that perspective, we've seen guys not be able to come back from stuff like that. Guys like Luke Rockhold and many others in the past. He looked good. I got to ask you this, Chuck. If you had to predict on the spot right now, 2 fights with Gaethje, first one, who do you think would win between him and Ilia? If you had to predict it right now on the spot without doing the proper breakdowns for it.
God.
It's a tough one, right?
It's tougher than
a part of me is like Ilia will land.
Yes.
But
he's going to...
This is Gaethje's world, and he's been able to figure this out many times before, and he loves a brawl.
He does. That is a toughie. I think I would give it, but this is just, I would probably still give it to Ilia. And it's only because really we haven't, he's just been so good, right? He's been so good, but there are so many question marks about that, man. Like obviously he's a big guy, but moving up into weight, like has he faced a guy anything like Justin Gaethje who's going to be able to, I don't know, but I think I would probably still lean Ilia. Wouldn't you?
I think I would lean Ilia just because I know he would land on Gaethje. Yeah. And I think at the moment it's like Conor McGregor, when he moved up to fight Eddie Alvarez, UFC.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like when he touches things, they just go out. I think we're in that point with Ilia. Let me ask you this then. Gaethje, Islam. Very interesting fight as well. Obviously, he fought Khabib. Yeah. Do you think he'd have a shot here at beating Islam if he did somehow get this next title shot?
I don't think so. And it's almost like, there's these certain guys, they somehow really rule the 5 through 2s. Like they can just kind of beat these guys or just beat them enough. Like they win 2 out of 3 against these guys and they can kind of put themselves in position. But there's something about Gaethje, and I know he was a champion before, like in a World Series of Fighting, but like in a situation like this where you face the real cream of the crop, guys who will wrestle him and make life hell for him, like he's kind of dropped some of those fights. I think that I think it would go similar maybe to what we watched with Habib. You know what I mean? I don't think he gets through that hurdle. God, it's just so weird with him. He's such a different kind of fighter in the sense that I feel like Justin Gaethje kind of strikes fear into anybody just because he is so relentless and he's so ballsy, right? Like he just keeps coming forward. You have to hit him. I think he's almost like a nightmare in that situation. If you don't hit him with something that's just going to, like, if you don't hit him with a 2x4, he's going to keep on you. So that element is always in play. But I think a guy like Islam would just know how to overcome all of that.
I was going to ask you if you thought Paddy Pimblett was in a good spot if he beats Michael Chandler to be
Wow.
potential title shot. But then I was having a look at the rankings here. Man, I keep forgetting. We've got Armin, we've got Charles, we've got Dan Hooker, we've got Justin Gaethje. And then you just move down the card and it's like, then you got all these up and comers. If you had to put money on it, who do you think gets this next title shot?
I would guess it's Ilia. But I mean, this is one of those situations where you're like, I've been through this with Ariel Helwani, like talking about, just kind of talking to him vicariously through the guys that he does his podcast with. So like we've had this whole thing, but it's basically, why would he go up if he's not going to get it? But at the same time, if you're telling the UFC, well, I'm going to 140, I'm going to 155 because I can't make 145. It's not like, you know what I mean? It's not like they have to do anything for you. I just think that that's the biggest fight. Because you still have those two things in play and you kind of risk it if you don't. I just think that having the champion versus champion thing is the way to go.
I keep coming back to the fact that it's like, if the UFC have all this money to be made, why risk Ilia going out there and fighting like who knows, Charles Oliveira or even like a Justin Gaethje and losing when you can make the biggest fight of Islam's career.
Yes.
In this fight. And
that's a great
Islam's
point.
been missing the Conor McGregor in his
That's
story,
a great point. I pointed this out in a column I wrote, like, he's a great fighter, historically great at this point. I mean, people can legit now make the comparison with him and Khabib, but he doesn't move the needle like some of these guys. And I think that he kind of almost naturally in a situation like this gets the foil, right? Like he gets the guy that's going to come in and bring out something more of a rivalry, cast out on the situation, makes it seem bigger, all of that stuff. And basically makes him the B side. But at the same time, at least there's an A side. So I'm like, I think that would be beneficial for both parties in this situation.
Yeah, every time I speak to Javier Mendez, he goes, look, we don't want to fight another featherweight moving up. But at the same time, and I know they want to do welterweight really bad. So who knows, maybe they're waiting to see if JDM beats Bilal.
It's like musical chairs with these titles right now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I would argue for Islam's legacy in terms of, money generation and becoming a superstar, being in the biggest fight the UFC can make outside of John Jones and Aspinall. That wouldn't hurt. So I don't know. We'll see. But then again, it's like maybe they also know, hey, Ilia's not an easy fight. So there's also that as well. But then JDM, imagine JDM becomes champion. Then you're fighting a guy that is relatively unknown outside of Australia, who is a much tougher fight than when people realize from what I know about him and his camp. So, and what he can do. We haven't even seen it yet.
This is crazy times right now, man.
Where do you go? What do you do? How much does that second belt matter over a crazy legacy and an unbelievable fight? So, hey, let me ask you this as well, man. Speaking of lightweight, obviously some big performances for Biometers and of course Ruffy. But before we talk about those guys, man, Jalin Turner, this is a guy I know like a lot of us were big on. You guys were talking about it in the excellent pregame that you guys did with Luke Thomas and Brian Campbell. One of my favorite segments in all of MMA when you guys do that, about how we thought this guy was going to be the future and how hard it's going to be for us to get to a point where we were like, well, maybe it's not going to happen. Maybe we were like, well, maybe if he does this, maybe he does that. Maybe if he changes stuff around, he can still do it. Well, he's retiring, man. He said he's had enough. This is it. How crazy is this, dude? We went from saying this guy is the future to having this kind of run, and now it's all over. Give me your reaction to the fact that Jalin Turner is most likely done in MMA.
It's crazy. I mean, like it's one of those things. I can remember talking maybe a couple years ago, whatever it was now, but they're just having this whole discussion, bold predictions type thing, and I said he'll be a champion. I really believe that his frame, 6'3", just his ability that we'd seen to just kind of maintain, the range, really become that sniper. Like the way he fought, I was like, he's too awkward. Like he's too awkward for people. They're gonna have to figure this guy out. And he hits a bad patch, and he goes into this situation this week, and he's kind of saying to people, I fell out of love with the game a little bit. I had to kind of rediscover my love for it. So what am I supposed to think? Like, you think he's going into this fight thing, renewed? I thought that this would be a good fight for him. I really thought that he would be able to kind of showcase, kind of go back to what he was doing, and pick up a big win in a big spot. And it just doesn't happen. But for him to lay down the gloves, I was like, what is going on, man? Because yeah, it was discovering the real love of the game. I mean, if you're buying this whole at face value, that's not what you do. So it makes me think that he was more thinking along the lines of, I'll give it one more chance. And if it doesn't work out for me, I'm done. Maybe he's being rash. I don't know. But that's one of the crazier careening, spiraling situations I've seen. And it feels very premature, if I'm being honest. How old is the guy? Like
I just looked it up. He's 29.
See,
right?
He
joined the UFC in 2000. Well, Dana White Contender Series 2018. So is it a situation where he just got to the dance too early? And like we've seen in the past, it just kind of like maybe wasn't ready for it and it kind of hit him at the wrong time.
It really could be something like that. He's had like some mistakes. Like I hate to like kind of, sometimes you're like, it's not a fighter IQ thing. It's just more of an instinctual thing. Something like when he was in this particular fight, he's on top in the situation. And I don't know how you were feeling, but I was sort of like, you need to get up, man. You need to get up and get it back into your realm a little bit. If you're going to go down there, make sure he's hurt more than he is. Cause it's like right now you're in danger. And moments later, he's tapping out. It just seems like that kind of thing, just mistakes. And I'm like, I don't know where that comes from. I don't know if that's coaching or whatever that is, but the things that I thought he would kind of round a corner on, he just never has, like, so not yet. He's 29, but he hasn't been able to put that together yet. So it's just a weird one, man. It is a very weird one. I have a son he's into it. Like he's pretty into it. He's 14 now. And that's one of his guys. Cause the spire, the tarantulas and all this. He likes all this stuff. And we talk about it, and we were talking about it tonight as it's going on. And I mean, it's just, he's as puzzled as I am. He's paid attention to all these fights. And I'm like, I don't know, man. It's just, sometimes you see this with these guys, like you have high hopes for him and some reason they just kind of skid off. He's a glaring example because I think that a lot of people really kind of had a buzz on him. But you remember guys like Jimmy Hedis, like there were guys like Jimmy Hedis back in the day. I remember going and talking to him, and he just got buzzsawed in a fight. And then it was kind of like one more fight, two more fights, and then he was just gone. Never heard from him again. So sometimes you see these guys, they do that. It's just a strange thing.
It's weird, isn't it? Because every time the guys sign up young, it's like a lot of them will drop off. A lot of them can hang in there. Like Jake Matthews just re-signed another 5-year contract. The UFC, he got signed when he was like 19. Robert Whittaker.
Yeah, because it feels like 20s. He's been in the league since like 2008. Like,
yeah, I know.
Like he's been there forever.
Insane. Yeah. And Robert Whittaker became champion. He got signed early. But it's almost like Moneyball, right? When Brad Pitt talks to the scouts or whatever about how everybody's, he got that draft pick, didn't go to college. They said he would be the star, but it wasn't true, and he missed out on this big part of his life. And I wonder if for Jalin Turner, he's like, dude, I'm 29. This isn't like everyone's telling me I'm the future, but this isn't happening the way that they said it would.
Maybe the pressure is too much. I don't know.
The pressure, man. The pressure, right?
That's a lot of
from
pressure.
From a young age.
I remember. You remember Brandon Thatch? Remember that guy?
Yeah.
So he was another one. I remember going to talk. He had a couple of big wins early, I think that Jalin. I'd have to think of the parallel with Jalin Turner. Like it's almost like I feel like there's other guys who've kind of been in his situation who dropped off precipitously until they just kind of disappeared. But Brandon Thatch was one of those guys, just from from his dynamic couple of wins. I remember people were talking about him. They thought that he was going to be a guy who would make a lot of noise, and it was almost the same thing, like a couple of losses and then boom, he was just gone. And I think when it's guys that it's tough to get a lot of people to agree that you're a good prospect, that you're really coming up and that there's genuine hype, and you kind of back it up for a while and then you trail off that fast. It's just I guess it's kind of a shock, to our systems, because we're used to guys like that at least panning out, even if they kind of go 500 for a while and stuff, or they hang around a lot longer than that,
Dude, I think it's crazy. Like, not to take away from, the big win, of course, I'm going to say it kind of looked like, when you go to like a jiu-jitsu class or something, and then you're just really tired and you just cannot be stuffed doing what you need to do to get out of the position. That's what Turner kind of looked like to me. He kind of didn't give up, but he was kind of like, I know what I should be doing, but I just do not have the will or the strength to do it. And it was just kind of like, dude, just take this choke. We've all, anyone that's done jiu-jitsu, any kind of sport or anything, we've all been in a position where we're ready to go, brother. Just give me the keys.
You know, Dana White says a lot of stuff, but the one thing that he says that I've always been like, well, that is unequivocally true, is if you're not fully in the game, if you're mentally not fully wanting to be in a fight, you shouldn't be fighting, you know? And I wonder a little bit about that with him. And I've thought that a little bit without him kind of saying what he was saying this week before. Kind of disinterested in weird ways that I was like, I wonder how much he really even wants to be doing this. And not to the point where you'd question that he couldn't overcome it or something like that. Maybe you could point to complacency, or like maybe he was just overconfident. I don't know. But this one, I felt that too. I just felt that too. Like it didn't feel like he's on the top, but you're like, dude, play smart, get out of this. And it just felt like I don't know, just some kind of disinterest there. You know?
All right, guys, I want to talk to you about our sponsor, MANSCAPED, who make this podcast possible. I'm, of course, talking about the Chairman Plus, the electric foil shaver by MANSCAPED, placing the power of a barber-quality shave in the palm of your hand. Whether you're suiting up for the boardroom, getting ready for a date, or setting the stage for cuffing season, the Chairman Plus delivers professional-grade performance tailored to your style. It's luxury reinvented for the modern man who demands more. Ready to step up? Why not join the trusted movement? Over 12 million men. Visit manscaped.com now. Use the code word submission. Get 20% off and free shipping now. And you keep this podcast going. You support this show and you support yourself. Just quickly, what makes the Chairman Plus stand out? Well, it's all about versatility and precision. It comes with 2 interchangeable skin-safe blade heads. Uses 3-blade foil for a close, smooth shave. Has skin-safe technology to help reduce razor burn. And of course, the Chairman Plus is waterproof, so it lets you shave right in the shower. And by the way, how about this? 60 minutes of runtime on a single charge, so you're sorted no matter where you go. Manscaped also has a 30-day money-back guarantee, so why not try it risk-free? Use the code word submission. 20% off and free shipping today. Risk-free 30-day money-back guarantee. Manscaped keeps the show alive and keeps your dating life and your smoothness alive too. Jump on Manscaped right now. And guys, I just want to talk to you about our other sponsors, SAILY. SAILY is a groundbreaking eSIM that has you sorted wherever you go in the world. Super low prices, super easy to use. All you got to do is download this app. Have a look at me. I'm in the app. I choose the destination to where I need to go. Boom, click a couple of buttons and I'm set. Forget about taking out your SIM card. Forget about lining up in long lines at the airport. Forget about having to change your phone number and everything about your phone. SAILY has you sorted. It's easy, it's simple. It comes with all the security features that you need. Why not just use the amount of money that you need for the destination that you need without having to sign up to crazy plans that go for months at a time that you have to get out of, or paying per day crazy amounts of money and coming back at the end of the holiday to having to take out a loan just to pay off the amount of money that you spent on the holiday using your phone. So do this right now. Go to saily.com/submission or click the link in the bio below. Get 15% off your first purchase with the code word submission. That's 15% off your first purchase with the code word submission. Get SAILY in your life and change it forever. And now, back to the program. Kind of sad as well. No post-fight interview. No one really kind of captured him putting down the gloves.
My son was pointing this out. He's like, aren't they going to go over there? He said they
can we not do this?
Like, I know. I'm like,
we don't want to do this. I don't know what's going on.
Maybe anyway. From the was it Clay Guida who took off the gloves, and they're like, Clay, I know she put down the gloves, and they're kind of like asking, like, oh no, I just wanted to. Remember, he kind of did a fake retirement. He didn't really retire. Yeah. So maybe they're spurned by that still.
I remember like Israel took his gloves off after the Sean Strickland loss in Sydney. We were there cage side, but we're like, oh my God, it's happening. But then it wasn't happening. And I think someone with Dana White was probably like having a heart attack cage. Oh my God. This was like Lord. After Sean Strickland punched the fan leading into that fight and almost got deported. Dana White's like, fuck. And I remember we watched that fight like, is this real? Like, are we high? Someone put out a gas in the stadium? What is going on here? So they, by the way, speaking of people taking stuff off, King Green almost got naked walking out to the octagon today, just throwing his shirt here, top there. I thought he was going to take his pants up at one point and this was going to be a performance for the fans. But, man, Mauricio Ruffy coming out there with potentially the KO of the year. What was your reaction when you saw that? I mean, I know the guy was like a bodyguard for some billionaire Chinese CEO. Yeah. But surely he wasn't knocking out all the people that were trying to assassinate him in the middle of the night with those kind of kicks, right? That was unbelievable.
Well, I'll tell you something. Because ESPN Plus I don't know what was going on, but apparently it wasn't just me. Like I saw a lot of people complaining that they couldn't get the fights for whatever reason. I could not get signed into the app, and I tried it with different devices, different browsers, all this stuff. Could not get in there. So finally I had to borrow a stream, and but I was able
gave it back. That's the main
I gave
thing,
it back.
Chuck.
I gave the stream back. So like so I saw you were kind enough to kind of send me the knockout itself, but I was able to go ahead and go back and look at it. And man, it's one of those clean things. It's almost like watching. They always talk about like a knife going through butter, like that sort of thing. It's so clean the way that kick lands and knocks them over, that it's like it really did remind me of that Terry Edom knockout with Barboza from way back in the day. What a beautiful thing, man.
Everyone in the gym tomorrow trying to throw that kick on their sparring partners. After the UFC, everyone's always. I remember this one time GSP did a can opener. I did a can opener to my jiu-jitsu coach at the time, and he told me, "You do that can opener again, man, and I'm going to break your ribs."
Dude, that's hilarious.
After all the Stephen Thompson ones, he used to throw the kicks at people like completely had looked nothing like him. And this will be happening in the gym. What is on tap next for him, do you think, after this? This is unbelievable, man. He wants Beneil Dariush. Obviously, I messaged Beneil after that. I don't know. He didn't seem that excited by this, and I don't blame him. Like
Beneil should be thrilled by this. Like he should be thrilled by this.
I mean, he after what happened to him and the UFC promising him they're going to make it up to him. This would be
very cruel, wouldn't it? All right, we're going to feed you to one of these fight nerds and let you. But Beneil is weird because I'm like, you feel for Beneil because I feel like nobody actually calls him out, or not too many people actually call him out. In that sense, I'm like, hey man, like you got a guy who has some juice right now. It's not the worst thing. Beneil is so good. If somebody's going to slow that guy down, I mean, Beneil could do that, So I wouldn't automatically shut that down, but I understand that he wants somebody maybe a little higher in the rankings,
Imagine we slot Fiziev in there. What about that?
What's that? Which one?
Imagine we put Rafael Fiziev in there.
Oh man. Hey,
Imagine that. Is that something? Do you think that's something?
I would be down for that. I'd be down for that.
I mean, not great. Mauricio is good. It's tough. It's a tough one, but
yeah.
I mean, you could put that on a pay-per-view, right? That would sell.
I think you could. Well, the great thing is, man, like with that dude, like with who, kind of like where he's at, and that whole camp is now generating this. I don't know. What would you call this? Because we've never. Have we seen anything like this?
Dude, this is unbelievable. They cut to these guys, right? And you got like Pratis there, Ohio there, Gian's there. Like you're like, dude,
all of them, and they're all just
right
kind of one card to the next. Somebody seems to be knocking somebody out. I mean, and yet now you got Silva, who's got the Bryce Mitchell. What a crazy bunch of heat that fight has. I feel like that some of the attention to this pay-per-view went to them, people talking about a non-title fight, but like they've got a buzz going on, man. And it's a lot of fun because I can't recall anything even remotely like this. I can remember back to like the Team Quest days or stuff like that where you'd have certain guys win, but nothing like this where they're the tight-knit, almost eccentric group of people coming together, and they're like marauders. They're just going in there and beating everybody.
I will say that, you and me, we've been around MMA for a while. You obviously a lot longer than myself, but, we've dealt with like managers, teams, all sorts of interesting people. And I'll say Ivan, one of the guys that sort of runs that team and the fighters, with them, like I spent time with the Fighting Nerds when they were in, in Sydney. I did some stuff with them. I do a lot of stuff with Kaya. One of the most professional, smartest kind of managers out there, and Kaya as well. Like these guys always, like you said, they always kind of put themselves in the middle of these cards. They have the glasses. They're kind of like their team is sellable, and they kind of go with it, and they put the glasses on everyone. They do the thing. I think that these guys are kind of like emerging as the team right now in MMA.
They are. And,
and a couple more wins. You got Kaya winning that. You had Silva winning against Bryce. You got, what about Prates, dude? Like,
I know, dude.
He goes out there, UFC 314. Like,
I know.
These guys are going to be right in there in almost every division.
I think there's something about, like, obviously the fight game has undergone changes too. And a part of it is like a social media phenomena. Like, and the UFC has been very good to embrace, back in the day, Twitter, they were one of the first leagues to really get behind it, and like it exploded through social media and all that stuff. They understand, like when you say that they're at these events and they kind of put themselves out there, the importance of that. I think that they've understood that. But as long as they're winning, you know what I mean, and they're kind of got this like brother and sisterhood, like everything going on with that clan. It's different, right? Like they're just kind of like they're just kind of ascending together, and that we haven't seen anything like that. There's no such thing as a collective. It's almost like a pro wrestling thing or something at this point. It's just weird, man.
Dude, unbelievable. I mean, the UFC, they've really leaned into this whole social media influencer thing.
Yeah.
My soul, because I hate to see a lot of our friends miss out on their opportunities during fight week. Like I did a fight week recently, and it was just like zero access to everyone. Like, you know what I mean? Like you don't really speak to anyone, no one-on-ones. And then it's like, a social media person doing one-on-ones in the back, and their stuff's being shared, and you know what I mean, like priority stuff. And I've like some of the guys, like absolute like legends in the game that we're friends with. I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah,
and you hear Dana White talk about like moving them up to the top, and it's just like I get what they're doing, but I just think the media deserve more, all the work they've put in, and a lot of these social media influencers don't even kind of know much about the UFC. So it's like,
I mean, eventually I think in Dana's mind of just being like, oh, we could just do away with Media Row and just kind of have a luxury box full of influencers, and we'll let them kind of be the coverage coming out. I mean, they're not far from that in a weird way at this point, man. It's like, it's very strange. I try to, when we were putting together this team at Uncrowned with the Yahoo guys, it was sort of like, should we go back to covering, live events, being there for fight weeks? And the consensus was almost like, why bother? It's better to get guys, it's better to get people on our own and just kind of do it. You know what I mean? Like it just, kind of get them away from the fight week, try to get them a week before fight week or whatever it is, like I did with Pereira, or like I did with Peyton Talbot on another card, and Marab and those guys. So we're trying to take a little bit of a different approach, but it is very discouraging, man. I will say that. Like I went to the Sphere card out in Vegas, and I saw a lot of that going on. You feel like a little bit like an artifact in those situations.
Did they hook the legend up? Did they hook you up with some stuff, or nothing?
No, not really. Not really. And part of that is just a philosophical change. Part of that is just, there, like, it'd been a while since I'd been to a live UFC, and there's new people, there's just new people. I was sitting next to, what's his name? Robbie Fox, the guy from
that guy,
which is a great guy. I love the
Mom's
dude.
Basement,
but it's a lot different than like the days when I'm sitting next to Kevin Iole and all those dudes on. So it's like it's a different cast. I
remember I used to walk in. Me and Casper would walk in the room. It would be you. It would be Ariel. It would be Luke Thomas, and it would be Mark Ramundi and Elias Cepeda, Damon Martin, and John Morgan, and all these icons. And I was just like, man, I'm just so lucky to be like in the vicinity of you guys, to be able to watch you do your thing, to be able to learn from you guys. And you guys really kind of gave people like myself and Casper and all these people an opportunity to be here. It's true, man. And I don't know. I just think sometimes people forget, like when I see John Morgan in an event, like, or like yourself in an event, man, you guys have done so much. I really appreciate you guys.
I appreciate that, man. I don't want to look at it like, oh, the golden days are past, because there's no need for it. I mean, it's still a fairly young. I mean, honestly, the core of people you're talking about now, they're like, middle-aged, but it's not like they're, in boxing where some of these guys are like 85 and 90, you know what I mean? Like there's nothing like that going on. The sport's too young. So,
and Gareth still looks sexy. He's still got the
Gareth, still got the Argyle, man. Still got the Argyle. Yeah, man, but I haven't seen him in a long ass time.
And I messaged him to do some boxing thing. He never responded. I don't know if he's a fan of mine, but it's okay.
He's like, last time I saw him, man, he was like completely transformed, lost a lot of weight. The dude cool. He was looking good, man.
He's a legend. I love it. I love all the icons, man. All those guys who are kind of like characters, and it's cool. I want to see him around the sport, but just like to let people know, like Casper and I, we cover the sport. When we do like a local UFC show, most of the time we're not even out there, and that just shows you, because there's different ways to cover the sport, and but you got to do what you got to do, and that doesn't always open doors for you when it comes to live coverage at UFC events. But you got to do what you got to do, man. You know, so
I feel like I mean, I've pissed my share of people off, you know, if you're trying to tell the truth. And a lot of times what I'm writing is columns, you're supposed to have an opinion. And if you do that, obviously certain doors close to you too, like, or they try to. I mean, ultimately, I've never been one of those guys who gets into huge beefs and like, you know, you can't talk to a certain manager and his whole stable of fighters or anything like that. Like, I've never had anything like that, but there's some petty grievances that kind of get brought up. And
you just wouldn't believe. It's like Arrested Development, right?
I know.
Like some of the stuff that happens, Curb Your Enthusiasm. And you know, we've been through it all, like the not speaking to people's fighters.
I mean,
but we're in a good spot now, but you know.
Yeah. No, you guys are doing great, man. I was happy, like, in talking to Luke Thomas and Brian Campbell, and obviously they've been on the show, and I told you before, I was like, you know, I don't think I've actually been on the show. So it was good timing. I was ready to do it. And it's kind of fun because I haven't done a post-fight show since the Ringer MMA show that we were doing with Ariel and PT. And so this is my first one. So this was kind of fun. It's fun to jump on and like
many, you know, if you ever have time, man, it's such an honor for me. Before we wrap up, just a couple more things.
Sure.
First up, they released the UFC 314 card, man. And what a beautiful card, a thing of beauty. This thing is looking unbelievable. So many questions to be answered in Miami, from Alex Okanovsky, what his future is, to, of course, newcomers and Patricio Pitbull joining the UFC. But one of the things I wanted to ask you was Pitbull on the prelims. What was your reaction? Pretty wild. Big move. So wait a minute. UFC here.
Did they announce this? Like, I knew the fight, but like, did they announce the card as a whole tonight? Because I don't even think I even saw it. So they've got.
Yeah, let me show you. I'll bring it up on the.
Yeah, if you can pull that up, let me take a look at this.
Let me show you right here. Let me just go into the old submission ready.
See, this is what happens when they don't let you in. I was like 30 minutes late to even get on the pay-per-view. I didn't even see the Robbie Lawler stuff. Like, I was like,
oh, dude,
Robbie Lawler, what? You know, I didn't even catch that part of it.
Well, we're going to get to that before we wrap as well. But yeah, if we have a look at this, man. So this is the main card right here. And let me know if you can see this, Chuck. Yeah, so as we can see here, they decided to put up the Reyes fight over here onto the main card. Of course, incredible card here, and just a lot of storylines. Will Carlos Pradas emerge as a future welterweight contender after this fight? This whole thing, you know, Silva, future featherweight, Bryce Mitchell, that's a whole thing. Paddy Pimblett, big deal for the lightweight division if he can beat Michael Chandler, Lopez, and Volkanovski.
Wow, that is a great card.
But then if you have a look at the prelims, look at this. Yair Rodriguez, Patricio Pitbull.
Why would they do that? Why would they do that?
Is that interesting? That's pretty cool.
It is pretty cool. It's a little strange, only in the sense that obviously you get some of these cards where they're you know, they're doing some fight nights that are out at live venues, and I mean, that's a perfect card. If you're going to do that, like, you could do that as a main event somewhere, you know, which is a little strange. And also, like, a lot of these cards, and I mean, we're diehard. We're diehard guys. We'll find the value in a pay-per-view like this. But if you're talking to casual people who are like kind of coming into it, they're like, you know, you got the Alex Pereira fight, and then maybe they know the Justin Gaethje fight, and then they're like, oh, the rest of it's garbage, isn't it? Like, they don't even think there's anything on it. So it looks like these cards are top heavy, whereas that card, what is that, 6-7 fights of you know, really stacked. We don't see a lot of those unless there's some kind of gala event like the UFC 300. So power to the UFC. I don't know why they're doing that, but that's a good looking card.
Yeah, it's wild, man. Like, sorry, I think my internet's cut out just there for a second. Let me know. Can you see me okay, Chuck?
Yeah, I can see you. I got you.
Yeah, it's wild, man. But it's one of those things that I agree with you. Sometimes you're like, man, this card could use a fight. They could probably take like 3 or 4 of those fights, make them main events. It's interesting though. It's like more people being able to see Patricio Pitbull do his thing, I guess. Maybe that's good without a paywall. But yeah, wild. It's going to be a lot of things that need to be answered come Miami time. Quickly, as we wrap up, Robbie Lawler in the Hall of Fame. If I say Robbie Lawler to you, favorite moments, memories, what do you think? What stands out to you? Obviously, he's had a lot, and this isn't just in the UFC. This is across a number of promotions. So I'm going to open this up to you, Chuck. Across a number of them, what is that 1 or 2 or 3 moments for you that kind of stand out in Robbie Lawler's legacy? So many crazy fights.
I think it was him falling asleep at the press conference that time. Do you remember that?
That was good. That was also the other press conference where he said he'd knock that guy out. I forget who. Just said, I'm going to knock him out.
Dude, he was the first guy. I mean, because I was really started in earnest covering the sport in 2008, probably in earnest, like kind of doing stuff in 2007, but like where you're really segueing and writing mostly about MMA. And he was just one of those guys from the earliest moments that just was such a shark, man. Like, just one of those guys you're like, I'd be like, you'd imagine if I got into a scrap with that guy, like how scary that would be. Just
Robbie Lawler, you mean?
Yeah.
No one's messing with
Like,
Chuck.
Yeah, no, Robbie Lawler. And you were mentioning his fights. I think you can't, like, there's so many good ones, man. And you could go back into all of his fights preceding, going back to his initial UFC stuff and like preceding the UFC when he really came back and he became a champion. But that run where he fought like Carlos Condit, Roy McDonald, Hendricks, and they were just, it was almost what it reminded me of was like the golden era of heavyweights, where these dudes were just butchers in boxing in the 70s, and they're just taking years off each other's lives. It sounds horrible to say it like that, but they were all so good, and it meant so much to them, such good competitors, and they were so mean that they'd go in there and alter each other every single time. And I felt like he did that to a number of fighters through that, just took them out of the game essentially. So in my mind, and remember Matt Brown was in there, like there was a couple of other, but just that run, man, was one of the greatest butcher moments where you're like, this guy is just like, we talk about Justin Gaethje, like, what, man, there's a price to be paid when you fight a guy like that. You just look like you tumbled down, 1,000 foot of a rocky cliff. You just look like it's a trauma event. That's still second to what Robbie Lawler was doing back then, man. He was just hurting people. And I think that era, like, I don't even know if we'll ever get like that again, because his mindset was still to brawl deep down, It was just like this survival, this instinct, this animal thing, like that I could never quite identify. But I was at a couple of those fights, man, and I gotta say, like, it was they were true events. I think they'll always stand the test of time. The McDonald fight and the way that thing went down. I mean, it's still one of the greatest of all time.
Dude, that McDonald fight, that changed the career trajectory of another guy who we thought was going to be the champion in the division for ages. And then after that, boom, Dana White kind of like let him go and moved him along. One of my favorite moments, speaking of Miami, was Strikeforce Miami in 2010 with that Melvin Manhoff fight, man. Unbelievable. The comeback one. Yes. Unbelievable.
That's right, man. I forgot about that. Like, that's what I'm saying. He had so many. And I did a
multiple
big piece.
Runs. Yeah.
I remember I did a big piece back in the day. This has been like more than a decade ago on Bettendorf, like going down there talking to like Monty Cox and all the guys. And how would you even explain this? They had so many guys like Jens Pulver and Matt Hughes, Tim Sylvie, all the guys that kind of came out of that area, or that at least went in that area and honed their craft. But dude, the local legend is Robbie Lawler. I mean, everybody who talks about him, he's just like it would be like if you were visiting Louisville and Muhammad Ali or Cassius Clay. It had that kind of vibe to it. Like, everybody talked about him like he was just some mythical figure that emerged in that area, man. But I don't know. Like, I think he kind of ran parallel with my career. So like, he was one of the guys that I covered for a long time. So I'll always have like a dear place, in all the coverage that I was able to do with that guy.
Yeah. Speaking of that, UFC 214 Anaheim, worst interview Casper and I had ever done for Submission Radio. He was
no good at that.
We asked him a bunch of questions. He kind of got mad at us, just wouldn't answer, and we just kept going and going. I kept asking him about Disneyland and theme parks, and he did not want to talk about it. Then after the interview ended and it cut, he's like, "Thanks so much, guys. That was really good. I really enjoyed that." I'm like, "Why wasn't that on the thing?"
He would do that to me too, though. Like, he would do the exact same thing. Like, he would be very conversational, and you're like, "Okay, we're gonna have a good." And then as soon as you started to like go on the record type thing, just shut it down, man.
Look what I got here.
Oh boy,
Chuck Mindenhall. Will he keep his lid, or will he lose at UFC 313? Will your main event prediction cost you? Absolutely not. You picked Ankalaev. What's your message to your uncrowned brethren who question you?
You know what, man?
Main event pick.
I thought that would be the difference maker, like that we'd all be kind of parallel, and we get to that one, and I was like, if Ankalaev pulls this off, I'll look like a genius, right? But like the what happened was, At that, I had already, and I was on the Morning Combat show, like, and I'd already changed my mind. So I'm like, I'm gonna go Pereira. So I'm like, you know, I'm a hypocrite. But this is the one that's kind of like, this is
the one
on
that
the
matters,
record.
bro.
This is the one that matters. And these guys are really like, oh, they're gunning. We're coming for you. You know, they're giving me a bunch of shit, but on the side. But I want to point out that this is the new year. This is 2025's. I think as we left 2024, I was something like 18-1 with the picks. So then they started again, and I started off 8-1. So they've been chasing me for a while. So this is their big victory lap moment. I think Drake is probably now moving into first place because he was one game behind me here, one behind me, and I think his picks were like 4-1 tonight or something like that. So
okay,
yeah,
okay. So Drake, you and Drake, that's the new rivalry we're going to focus
I
on.
guess,
New
man.
column.
I've already heard from him. So he's
messaged you already.
He's already messaged me, man. Like these guys, it means a lot to them. You know,
it's high stakes, man. High stakes.
I'll be back. You know,
new column.
The Lucindo fight was called off 5 seconds prematurely. That one carries an asterisk.
That's a mulligan to me, man.
Yeah. So that one's basically, I'm 2-2. I'm not going to take 2 and 3 for this.
It's like you're like John Jones and the Matt Hamill loss, you know, like, is that really a real thing? As we wrap, Chuck, new column coming out on Crown. You'll be talking about all this action and more. What else can we look out for? What else is coming up?
Well, there'll be a pound for pound rankings, our brand new pound for pound rankings, which obviously will be altered. I think Alex Pereira was pretty high on them last time. So we'll see how that all shakes up. That comes out on Monday. And then, there should be I did this big Pereira feature that ran this week. I'm probably going to, you'll probably see some more of that type of thing, like more focused profiles coming out in the next couple of weeks here.
Love it, man. You're absolutely killing it. Of course, shout out to New York Rick as well on Crowd, one of my good friends too. And dude, I'll tell you what a special moment this is for me. The voice held up, but it got better,
stronger. In the championship rounds, man, you were rolling here.
That's it, dude. Hard body karate. Chuck Mindenhall, thank you so much for joining me, man.
All right, brother. Thanks.